Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Okay, welcome everybody. We're a united Sangha, but we're made up of a lot of individuals. So we have this habit, I don't know if it's a tradition, but this habit of saying our names. And so if we can go around and everybody say their first name. I'm Jack.
Stuart. Jason.
Chris. I'm David.
Richard.
Tom.
Al.
Juan. Dennis.
Brian.
My name is Cass. I'm Brad.
Larry.
My name is Clint.
Matthew.
My name is Harley.
Jim. My name is Roy.
My name is Jeff.
Don.
I'm Jim.
My name is Mark.
Alan.
My name is Joe.
George. My name is Brian.
I'm Hal.
Sean.
Leor.
David.
My name is David. Also.
My name is Val.
Peter.
Okay. I know that Richard is here for the first time and Young is back after a long time away. Anybody else here for the first time? Chris. Everybody else, please descend on them and make them feel welcome afterwards. One of the great, this is great Sangha, I think, and one of the great blessings, I'm not kind of Christian, but one of the great things we have about this Sangha is that being in the Bay Area is we have this fantastic array of speakers and practitioners who can come and share with us. And that includes today Pamela Weiss, who's been with us before. Welcome. Pamela has practiced in the Zen and Theravada traditions of Buddhism for over 25 years, including several years of Zen monastic training. She completed teacher training with Jack Cornfield through Spirit Rock, leads a Wednesday evening sitting group at SF Insight, and teaches classes, workshops, and retreats internationally. Pamela is also an executive coach and the founder of Appropriate Response, a company dedicated to bringing the principles and practices of Buddhism into the workplace. So, welcome.
Thank you. It's always funny to hear yourself, like in that way. So I wanted to open this morning with the story of the name of the company that I do my work under, which is an old Zen story. And in this story, a student comes to visit his teacher, a revered old Zen master, who is on his deathbed. He's in his last days. And he comes to pay his respects, and he gets to ask a final question. And he asks the teacher, "Tell me, what is the teaching of your entire lifetime?" Can you imagine? The poor guy is dying, right? But here's his last chance to get some wisdom from his beloved teacher. And the teacher, in pure pith Zen form, says, "What is the teaching of your entire lifetime? An appropriate response." So I've been teaching in a variety of venues, and I like to ask people why they would do something like practice meditation. And I hear a variety of things, which we'll talk about today. But it seems to me that, I don't know if it's under or over, but there is an arching theme throughout the various responses. You might think about what yours is, which is that for whatever it is that we think we're engaging in, there is this idea of learning how to respond more skillfully to ourselves, to each other, to the world. And I like the term appropriate response because it kind of gives a balancing between being response-able or responsible, right, and being reactive. And most of us, it doesn't take too long to think about the trouble that our own reactivity causes. And certainly we see that if we look around, even not very far into the world. Enormous reactivity and damage that's done in that, messes that have to be cleaned up. And so an alternative to that is to learn to be able to respond with some intentionality rather than react in a kind of knee-jerk, habitual way. So maybe 20 years ago or something, I sort of fell in love with this story, and I went to see my Zen teacher at the time, and I asked him a question. And the question that I asked was not what is the teaching of your entire lifetime. I have to wait a few more years. He's not old enough for that yet, but one day I might get to ask. Now I asked, what is the meaning of the word appropriate? If we're going to be looking at responding appropriately, well, what does that mean? And I assumed that this is an old Zen story. It came from China, so that the English word appropriate is a translation of something, some Chinese character. And I said, so what's the original Chinese character that we translate as appropriate? And he lit up, and he said, actually, it's 3 characters that get translated to the English word appropriate. And the 3 characters are meet, each, teach. Kind of also very pith, right? And I thought, so it's giving some instruction. How do we meet each? How do we meet each moment, each breath, each person, each situation as a teaching? As something that we're willing to allow to influence, to impact us, to touch us in a way that is allows us to be malleable, to open, to grow, to learn. Because I think that when we're in a state of reactivity, it's sort of the opposite, right? Basically, reactivity is I'm right and you're wrong. There's not a lot of malleability. There's not a lot of openness. There's not a lot of interest in learning or in allowing a moment, a person, a situation to teach us something, to open us to something. We are instead kind of rigidly holding to our ideas, views, beliefs. And I don't know about you, but if I look around at really extraordinary degree of mess in the world, there's political mess, there's cultural mess, there's environmental mess. This is the seed, or I would suggest to you, you can check it out for yourself, but this kind of reactivity rather than this sort of willingness to meet each moment, to be open enough to let the moment teach us, is at the heart of the mess that we're in. And if that's the case, it's my hypothesis, then it's worth practicing. So I'll say a little bit more about the story at the end, but I've been looking for a kind of simple frame, like meet, each, teach, to talk about different elements or aspects of meditative practice, because it's gotten very popular, you may have noticed. It's like cover of Time magazine, and mindfulness this and mindfulness that. And I think that that's a great thing, because it's helped make what was once a kind of esoteric, not very accessible practice much more accessible. But there's also some distortion that comes with a popularization. And so I think there's also some confusion that's come into the field of what is it we're doing? Because it's not, meditation practice is not just a self-help process, right? It's not a self-improvement plan. Now, it doesn't mean that if you don't do it, you won't help yourself. And you might improve quite a bit, whatever it is you want to improve. But that's really not where it's coming from. There's quite a bit more that's possible. So I want to offer 3 different aspects of meditative practice for you to reflect on, chew on, consider in terms of how you engage with the practice. Hopefully it will bring some clarity, maybe even insight a little bit. And then we'll circle back to the story at the end. So mine's not quite as pith as an appropriate response or meet, each, teach. For those of you who've been around Buddhism for a while, you know that anything really worthwhile talking about in Buddhism has to come in at 3. Meet, each, teach, and appropriate response. So here's mine. It's 3 topics. I don't only have 3 words, but so here are the 3 elements of meditative practice. This isn't true. It's just what I'm saying for today, but hopefully it will be useful. So the first is calm down. The second is wake up. And the third is engage. So let's start with calm down. Most often when I ask an audience, and it may be true here, how many of you come to meditation practice because you want to reduce stress, find some quiet? Anyone have a sense of that? Yeah. It's a beautiful aspect of meditative practice, especially in the world that we're in, which is like 24/7, fire hose of non-stop experience, stimulation, right? So we live in a particular time and place where that calming down aspect of meditative practice is really useful. I taught yesterday afternoon and again this morning, and in both situations, I found myself in my car in quite a bit of traffic, rushing, and kind of swearing at other cars on the road because I was trying to get to my meditate. But that's what it's like. This is, I'm confessing, right? Even the meditation teacher needs to calm down. Because the world, especially the Bay Area, it's just nuts, isn't it? It's so calm down. Calming down is about, sometimes described as shamatha or concentration. It's a kind of gathering and stilling of the heart-mind. Usually in the midst of this constant stimulation, the mind is, in Buddhism it's often described as the monkey mind. It's just swinging from branch to branch, screeching maybe as it goes. And we all know the monkey mind. It's sort of the interior of what we would display externally as multitasking, right? And it turns out that there's nothing actually wrong with multitasking or with even having a monkey mind. The mind does what the mind does. But it turns out that all of that is kind of hard on your nervous system. So we call that stress. And our nervous system likes just one thing at a time. That's what calming down and the sort of one-pointed focus of meditative practice is about. Like, you know what it's like when you just get to do one thing? We all know this experience because the nervous system likes it. Whether it's in an athletic endeavor, right, where you're completely concentrated on what you're doing, or it's listening to music, or seeing a beautiful piece of art, or walking in nature, or having a conversation with someone where you're not checking your email every 5 seconds. Like that kind of, this is or a lot of the scientific research about, the cortisol levels go down and the blah, blah, blah. Boy, we need that, don't we? Just, because when we're revved like that, it's very hard to respond appropriately. There's a beautiful, useful, I think, image of meditation practice, which some of you may have heard before, but if you take a glass jar and you fill it with dirt and water and you shake it up, what do you have?
Dirty water.
Dirty water, muddy, dirty, churning water. So that's us most of the time. That's me driving here in traffic. Dirty, churned, muddy water. And so this first aspect of meditative practice is just put the jar down. This is an important way of thinking about it, I think, because we may turn, this one-pointed concentration into like another thing to do. And here's the secret of this element of practice is you just stop. And when you stop, then you see that everything is happening on its own. You don't have to do it. This is such a relief, because when we don't stop long enough to see that, we're running around imagining we're in charge, right? It doesn't take very long sitting in meditation to recognize you are not in charge, right? You're sitting there and what's happening? All kinds of stuff is happening. Did you ask that stuff to happen? You did not. If you're honest, right? Your mind is doing what it's doing, your body's doing what it's doing, your heart is doing what it's doing. The settling down is just the part that's noticing. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is stop. So the dirt settles. You put the jar down, the dirt settles to the bottom of the jar. It's not bad, the dirt. It's just dirt. Now what do you have in the jar?
Water.
Thank you. Clear water. So now you have clear water. So this is the second element of my theory of different aspects of meditative practice, which is waking up. So when you slow down and let your nervous system settle, so you're not in that kind of churned, jagged, muddy water, you're less reactive. You can see more clearly, right? The dirt settles, now you have clear water. It doesn't mean that, stuff's not going to bubble up from the bottom, or something's going to fly in, to the top of the jar, or, right? It doesn't mean, meditation doesn't mean you're going to be in this kind of static bliss state forever. No, what it means is that you settle down enough that you can see what's happening. The water is clear enough so that you can see, oh, I'm angry. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be angry. Oh, I'm busy planning. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be planning. You want to see it clearly. This is the heart of insight meditation. You want to see what's happening. And what we generally do is we see what's happening, and if it's a pleasant something, we want more of it. And if it's an unpleasant something, we try to get rid of it. And sometimes people even come to meditation practice and think, meditation practice, I'm not supposed to have any thinking. So they sit down and then they spend their whole time like, what's that thing? Like whack-a-mole. Right? Whack, whack, trying to get rid of their thoughts. This is a violent way to practice meditation. All you have to do is settle and then let whatever arises come and go, like clouds in the sky. Sometimes it's a very busy sky, just like sometimes it's a very busy highway out there. It was today for me driving here, right? But you don't have to do that either. You just notice what's coming and going. You pay attention. This is the waking up aspect. There's an element, I think, of this that I think is really important and particularly useful for this time and place, which is that some huge percentage of what we see is delusion, confusion. We see our pettiness. We see our anger, we see our irritation, and then we think, oh, I must be doing it wrong. No. You're doing it exactly right. Because this is what the Buddha saw. What the Buddha saw was our confusion. And he saw how confusion happens so that he didn't have to be, entranced, enchanted by it. He could see it clearly without thinking it was the truth. Now again, if we look at the mess that is happening in our world, I think that part of the difficulty is that all of us are walking around assuming that what we're seeing is the truth. When we start to practice meditation, when we calm down enough that we can start to see clearly, we see, I don't know about you, but I'll say this for me. I see that my mind is a complete crazy person. Completely. It's just, excuse me for the tape, but it's just making shit up all the time. And some of the stuff is kind of clever, but sometimes it's not even true. I remember, it was about a year ago, I think, but it was a very distinct moment for me. I was on a meditation retreat, and I was sitting where you are, listening to someone give a Dharma talk. And during the talk, it was a month-long retreat, and I was a few weeks in, and I was very settled. So everything was very vivid, and a lot of clear water. This was coming right in. And whoever it was, I don't remember who was talking, and I don't remember what they said, but I was completely wrapped, right? On a long retreat, for those of you who haven't done it, the talks and the meals are all of the entertainment you get. So there it is, it's like going to the movies. Somebody's giving a talk, and I was just like completely wrapped, listening to what they were saying, and it's going right in. So the end of the talk comes, and I hear this voice in my head say, well, that was a pretty good talk, but it would have been better if they had this opinion. And I heard that, and I thought, that's not true. Like, I didn't even think that what my mind said has its opinion about how this person could have improved themselves. I didn't even think that. But there it was. My mind all on its own having its opinions. So, I say all of that, I hope to give a sense of humor to it. But most of the time, we are walking around in what we would call in our sort of modern lingo with inherent bias. We are not, as the great Anais Nin said, we are not seeing the world as it is. We are seeing it as we are. But we don't think that. We just think what we're seeing is the truth. And then somebody else has a different truth and we're suddenly fighting. Again, if you extrapolate this out, you can see the seeds of a lot of the mess that we have in our world. And so when we practice this way, when we see how crazy the mind is, when we begin to see how biased we are, this doesn't mean we should just like give up, hang up the cleats and go do something else, wait for another lifetime when maybe we'll be more enlightened. No, this is a great thing, because what it brings us is a kind of humility for starters, right? Could use a little bit more of that in public life, right? Like, let's not walk around being so sure that we know how things are. Wouldn't that be good? Because the flip side of not so sure, which may feel like anxiety, is actually a kind of openness, a curiosity, an interest. I want to understand how things are. I understand if I pay attention and I am privy moment by moment to my own confusion and delusion and bias. If I understand that very deeply, then I'm going to be way more interested in learning, in being open to the moment, in this spirit of meet, each, teach. Don't you think? Like, okay, I have my perspective, but I have no idea what yours is. I already know what mine is. It'd be more interesting to hear from you. Oh, this would be so great if we had a world that was running more like that, don't you think? Where we all were walking around like wanting to know what the other person thinks, instead of, doing selfies and posting whatever. We have so many ways to give out our opinion and declare how things are. I was watching the ESPYs last night. I didn't even know what the ESPYs were, but I was watching them. And there was suddenly on the stage the lovely Michelle Obama, who I haven't seen much lately, right? And I was very excited. Oh, Michelle! And she was there to give an award. It's the Arthur Ashe Courage Award, which she was awarding to Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who is the founder of the Special Olympics. And Eunice's son, who looks just like a Kennedy, got up on stage and he gave a very Kennedy-esque speech about his mother and her work with the Special Olympics. And if you haven't seen this, I would really encourage you to watch, because basically what he's doing, and he is really praising her and the Special Olympics, and there's 10 Special Olympiads who are on stage with him, and all decked out in their little outfits. And anyway, he basically is talking about the Special Olympics as an example of the beauty of inclusion. And he's using it, I think, to make a much larger point about inclusion. And he does it very well, because he keeps talking about the Special Olympics, but he's really talking about everything. And you see the beauty of it, because you see these people standing on stage with him glowing, And anyway, this is that spirit, that kind of being willing to sit in the middle of our own delusion and be humbled again and again by how completely crazy we are, is a kind of, it's like a tenderizer. It's a softener. It helps us be more interested in people who may be different than we are. So the last piece, calm down, wake up, engage. I think engage sounds like it's about running around and doing a lot, but I think that it's a little bit of a paradox. What engage really means is to bring this attitude, to bring this quality of meet, each, teach into whatever it is we're doing, saying, how we are being in the world. So that when we're at work, or we are taking care of our family, or we are marching in the streets, or we're angry with someone, we bring this interest. We bring this kind of willingness to be curious about what's going on the other side. When we are able to see our own bias, in some ways even our own brokenness, that's where the light comes through. Because as we are willing to sit with ourselves, moment by moment, day by day, and meet our own experience with a kind of tenderness, with an openness, with an interest, with a curiosity, rather than good, I want it, bad, get rid of it, which is our kind of reactive, knee-jerk way of doing it. When we do that, then we are able to meet the moment in a different way. And there is a secret teaching in this meet, each, teach, which I learned the hard way. I was explaining this story to someone, and I had somebody kind of lean over my shoulder and correct me. So I was explaining that meet, each, teach is about meeting each thing and even celebrating the uniqueness of all of us, of each moment. And they said, you know, the word each is the Chinese character one. Ichi or ishi. It's a single stroke. And so it can be translated two ways. It can be translated as each, the particularity, but it's also one as oneness, as wholeness, as connectivity. And I think it's a beautiful kind of interior teaching in this story that when we have the openness and curiosity, the willingness to meet each, the uniqueness of each, we begin to close the divide of the divisiveness that we see and hear and feel so painfully all around us. We begin to find a kind of real intimacy where that other, whoever it, he, she, they were, is not so different. We begin to feel into a sense of our shared humanity. And it's from that place, in this kind of paradoxical balancing of, on one hand, totally honoring and celebrating the unique, quirky weirdness that each of us is, with this connectivity, with this unity and wholeness that is our shared humanity. If we can find a way to balance those two things, that then becomes an appropriate response. That's my current holding of it. So, having said that, it's useful to be open and curious about other people's opinions. I've managed to talk for quite a long time, and you all very graciously listen. But I would be genuinely interested or curious to see if there are questions, comments, anything you want to add or object to or offer a complementary or different point of view. Please, feel free. Please.
Pamela, thank you so much for very insightful talk. I loved what you said about becoming aware of that time when the thought arose that you didn't even agree with. And I have a question about that, because so I'll be walking down the street and, you know, see something or someone and have a critical, judgment come up, and then walk a little further and have a second and a third and a fourth, and finally think to myself, oh my God, you are so critical. Why are you, and then end up judging myself for those thoughts that just bubble up.
Yep.
And I think behind that is a desire to not be that way.
Yep.
To improve or, distance, have some more skillful response. Yeah. But that judgment is still there, and so that's the, beating oneself up over that. What would you say is a good way, aside from decades of practice, to perhaps become aware of that and work with that and, get beyond that?
You are aware of it, right? I mean, you just gave a pretty exquisite, very clear blow-by-blow description of how it works. So what part of it catches you? What makes you believe what it is that you are thinking, whether it's about the other person or about yourself? Because it's basically just judgment going in two directions.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I guess underlying that is this thought that, I need to be different than I am, or I'm not, acting or thinking in an appropriate way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of what happens as we practice over time, so I just want to normalize this, because does anybody else have anything like the other experience? I mean, this is, I think what you're bringing up is probably the single most sticky, difficult aspect of practice. Because it turns out that as we start to do what I was describing called wake up and notice what's happening, which you are doing in spades, I mean, that's, again, most people don't notice that they're having those judgments. They just see whoever it is, like, that guy's a jerk, and then they think they're right. Right? So you've already made quite a big movement.
Because I've often said I was happier before I started doing all this.
Exactly. I say that practice is bittersweet. And bittersweet is because the content of what we see, which is what you're describing, bitter. As I said, we see our pettiness, we see our judgment, we see our opinions. You can just feel like. But the thing is that the awareness itself is actually sweet. Now, here's a way to say it. I learned this from this wonderful guy named Utejaniya. It's a Burmese, Thai or Burmese? Utejaniya, Burmese, I think. Anyway, he's a monk who I sat with. He's not a monk. He's a lay person, which is one of the great things about him. And he started practicing because he was so angry all the time. And he practiced in his daily life. So he says this thing that's been very helpful to me, which is that in our experience, and certainly in meditation experience, there's always only two things. There's the awareness, and there's the content of awareness, meaning what we're noticing. So I'm calling the content is, for a long, long time, it's pretty bitter for most of us. A long time is like maybe the first 10 years of practice or so, maybe more. Bitter, 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 bitter. But the awareness, that's the sweet part. So what happens is as we start to get more aware, we are, at the same time, we're kind of identifying with the content. So what starts to help is to disidentify with the content and to begin to identify with the awareness. But awareness, what is that? Mm-hmm. It's so amorphous, There's this great story that came from, I can remember the guy's name. It's a writer who died. Anyway, here's the story. I can't remember his name. So there's these two fish swimming along, and then they pass this older fish who comes by, and the older fish says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And they say, "Great," and they nod and kind of keep swimming. And after they've gone a little further along, one of the young fish says to the other one, "What the hell is water?" So awareness is like that. It's always here. It's like the water we swim in. But we don't identify with it. We identify with the content. So anything you can do, personally, I think humor is really helpful. So when I say my mind is a complete crazy person, I'm saying that with a bit of a light touch, right? I'm not saying, "Oh my God, my mind is a crazy person, I should go check myself," because that's what the crazy mind wants you to do. The crazy mind takes itself very seriously. So the degree to which you can, that's why I like the image of the awareness is like a sky and the content is like clouds. If you can let that stuff have a kind of light cloud-like feel to it. And then when it doesn't, and you've got it, something's got you, then you can explore that. Like bring that same kind of interest and curiosity to like, what is this? Meaning, why do I believe whatever it is that's got you? And why do I believe this about myself or about the other person? And my experience is it just goes like that, me, you, it can flip around pretty easily. So if you can bring a sense of humor, sometimes exaggeration works. Like, yes, I am the worst ever possible, blah, 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 blah. Just to crack it open a little bit. That can be very helpful. But it's a place that makes it hard work in a way, right? That's why humor is helpful. Yeah. I don't know if that was a very good answer, but I appreciate the question because I think it's enormously universal. If we're going to do this practice, we don't just notice, we notice and then judge. That's just how it works. And there's all kinds of different theories for why that is, but regardless of what the theory is, it seems to be true. So thank you for having the courage to confess in that way. Yeah, please.
We were talking about skillfulness and clarity, and I think if we've meditated enough and looked at ourselves and had awareness, we realize that the water is clear only for moments. And yet, in order to have skillful action, you need to have clarity. So what I'm finding happens with me is I get indecisive, especially with the big things, because you're thinking, you know, you end up not trusting the lens you're seeing things through.
Yeah, I think that when we see how confusing things really are, or how complex, or that we can't ever possibly see everything from every angle, one option is to go to judgment. Another option is to go to fear, which is a kind of like paralysis. Oh my God, I don't know how it all works. The third option that I'm offering is humility. And the humility is to say, I don't know. I'm going to do the best I can, and then I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open and give myself permission to self-correct. Because we're always all just doing the best we can. And we're all bumbling along, you know. I mean, as I said, look at the mess that the world is in. This is all of us. We're trying. But the purity of your intention, that you're doing the best you can, that is really good. So there's a kind of sometimes complicated and confusing teaching of karma in Buddhist teaching. Karma simply means action. So you're talking about trying to figure out which action to take. So I think it's really useful that action isn't just what you do or say or decide. Action has three parts. There's the intention that goes into the action. There's the action, which could be a doing or a saying or a not doing or a not saying. All of that is action. And then there's the result. Practice means you keep your awareness consistent through all three parts. We tend to think, I'm going to make this decision, I'm going to take this action, and then I'm just going to be kind of at the behest of all of the consequences. But the point is, everything we do has a consequence, or don't do, or say, or don't say, has a consequence. And you want to stay awake after, so that you can learn from the consequences. Because maybe you've made the wrong decision and you need to change it, or you need to do something else. Maybe it seemed like the right decision for a while, but life is moving all the time. So we're always kind of, it's like, you know, if you do a balance pose in yoga, you notice pretty quickly that it's not static. There's a constant movement. So the ability to make a decision requires an intention to do the best you can. You take the action, and then you keep noticing, well, how did that work out? And if it didn't work out very well, you try your best not to be judgmental, but to be humble. And go, okay, that didn't work, let me try again. And most of us, you know, if we think about it, the biggest learnings come from, you know, the biggest mess-ups. It's not a pleasant thing to have to recall, but it's just true. And so it may feel like you want to be judgmental because you made the wrong decision, but it may turn out to be like the most important learning in your whole life. And life isn't about making the right decisions. Life is about learning. So there's a kind of reorientation there.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm listening to you. I sort of laid out these nice, clear, well, there's just these three things. And you're bringing in, the grit, which is, it's really real. And man, it's hard being human, right? This is the first noble truth. The Buddha said there's suffering in human life. And he's not talking about like acute pain. He's talking about what you're both bringing up. Yeah. Trying to navigate this wild, mysterious thing of being alive, man, it is just full of potholes and worse, right? So again, appreciate the honesty of your question and the sincerity of that. Are we at the end here?
We have a minute.
1 minute. In the back.
Are we recording this talk?
It's right there.
Good, because I find everything you're saying just at this point in my life, it's the business about making judgments. So I'm on Bart this morning, and judgment.
Yeah.
This is so easy.
Oh, yeah.
To do this. Now, I've not been one in my life to go for easy necessarily. So that itself says, wait a minute, what's more difficult is to find out what's right with things. Ooh, that's a challenge. And I'm hoping that maybe that experience and that insight, followed by this talk, I will be less inclined to do that.
And you don't have to, how would I say it? So if you're sitting on BART and you notice you have a negative judgment about someone, I would really encourage you not to notice it and then substitute it for a positive judgment. That's just kind of like, what's that thing called? Like positive thinking. What you want to, and this is to the much more courageous step, is to say, I don't know what's going on, right? And if you can catch the judgment and back off into what can create anxiety, which is, I don't really know, then the curiosity comes. Rather than you still being in charge saying, oh, that guy's a jerk. No, that guy's a wonderful, you don't know who that guy is, right? This happened to me 2 days ago or something. I was at Kaiser getting blood work done. And I was in a bit of a rush, and I was also anxious, because who likes to go to the hospital and get blood work done? And I'm standing in line, and I'm looking at these two women behind the desk, who are checking people in. And they're just sitting there, having this nice chat, and I'm like, oh. I was just, and I was what? And these, right. So here's the thing, I caught it. And I didn't say, hey, those are two wonderful people who know. All I said was, I don't know what's going on. They might be having I don't know what their conversation is about. And that was enough to back me off of my, self-righteous spin, so that when it was my turn to be called forward, and get checked in, if I had still been in that mood, believe me, the woman sitting across the desk from me would have felt it. And it would have been like, right. I would have been bad vibing her all over the place. And it would have been an unpleasant. She was so kind to me. Good morning, sweetheart. How you doing? I was like, oh. Like complete 180 on how I had been seeing her, 3 minutes before while she was yakking and I was standing in line. All of a sudden I was like, oh my God. This lovely woman who's receiving me in my anxious state with, enormous kindness. Boom, there it was. So you don't have to substitute a negative judgment for a positive one. It's actually just more judgment. What you want to do is back off and go, wait, I don't know. That's it. And then you can move in with more of this kind of fluidity and malleability and openness and curiosity. Then we can meet. And we can meet the person, whether it's on BART or at the hospital or at Starbucks or wherever it is. Then we can meet them and have an opportunity to have a different kind of connection. Good luck on BART.
Wow. Thank you so much for practical teaching. I'm going to be judging my judging.
My judging's better than your judging. I'm the best judging.
Before we close, which is when we stand in a circle and hold hands and have a closing, we have our host today, who is Cass.
That would be me, yes. So please stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. There's some fresh fruit and vegan treats. There's hot water for tea. There's cold water too. I'll be coming around with a Donna bowl, so your generosity is greatly appreciated. Helps the Sangha meet its obligations. And I guess there's a sign-up sheet on the credenza for anybody who wants to add their name to our mailing list. And at 12:30, some people gather at the front door and go out to lunch, and everybody's welcome to join them.
Any other announcements, Harley?
Yes, I'd just like to mention that our dear friend Dave Limkako is having some medical issues. So if you have his phone number or email, I'm sure he'd appreciate some moral and spiritual support at this time.
Well, I will mention Dana, which is generosity for the Sangha to help us defray our costs. We cooked a wonderful meal for the kids at Larkin Street Center yesterday. Served about 30 kids and staff or so. We also have a newsletter, which we send out about 300 paper copies. About 2/3 of those are to prisoners. And we rent this space, and we have these wonderful speakers. So it's suggested $10, but more or less of whatever you can afford. Thank you. So we will stand in
I'm happy to say something.
Okay.
So taking a moment to feel your feet pressing into the floor, feeling the support, the solidity of the floor holding you, of the earth beneath the floor supporting you. Taking a nice deep full breath. And in appreciation for our coming together today, we offer any goodness, any benefit, any merit that may have accrued from our being together with words and in silence. And with open hands and an open heart, we extend our well wishes, our care and compassion to all beings in all directions. Imagining our well wishes could move out from this circle we created, out beyond the walls of the room, in ever widening circles, touching the lives of those known and unknown. By the power and truth of our practice together, may all beings everywhere awaken and be
free.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.